Asia on the brink. 10 countries facing potential collapse by 2025. Asia, the world's fastest-growing continent, is home to economic powerhouses like China and India, as well as emerging nations with rich histories and cultures. But beneath the surface of progress and prosperity, several countries are teetering on the edge of collapse. From economic crises to political instability, environmental challenges, and social unrest, the signs are clear. Some nations may not recover without drastic changes. Today, we dive into the 10 Asian countries facing the greatest risk of collapse by 2025. Buckle up, because this journey will reveal shocking truths about the challenges these nations are up against. Let's begin with number 10, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has been in crisis mode for years, and the situation is only getting worse. In 2022, the country defaulted on its $83 billion debt, and since then, inflation has soared, fuel shortages have become chronic, and the nation is struggling to repay its international loans. With over 25% of the population living below the poverty line, many Sri Lankans can't afford basic necessities like food and medicine. The tourism sector, once a major source of income, has yet to recover from the pandemic, and foreign investors are hesitant to pour money into a collapsing economy. Political corruption and mismanagement have deepened the crisis, leading to mass protests and violent clashes. While international aid has provided some relief, Sri Lanka remains in survival mode. Without significant reforms, the country could remain in an economic freefall for years to come. At number 9, Pakistan. Pakistan is facing a perfect storm of economic, political, and security crises. Soaring inflation, a crashing currency, and an overwhelming debt burden have left millions struggling to survive. In early 2025, the Pakistani rupee hit an all-time low, making it even harder to repay its $125 billion foreign debt. Political instability, corruption scandals, and military interference have further destabilized the country. Terrorist organizations continue to pose a growing threat, while power outages, water shortages, and collapsing public services have turned daily life into a nightmare for millions. Despite loans from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, many analysts believe Pakistan is simply buying time before an inevitable collapse. Without drastic changes, the future looks bleak. Next up, number 8, Myanmar. Since the military coup in 2021, Myanmar has been in a downward spiral. The country is trapped in a brutal civil war, with resistance forces battling the military government on multiple fronts. The economy is in freefall, with sanctions from Western nations, foreign businesses pulling out, and a collapsing currency. Inflation is soaring, and citizens are struggling to afford even the most basic goods. International organizations warn that millions are at risk of starvation, with food prices surging beyond what the average citizen can afford. The political crisis shows no signs of resolution, and experts warn that a full-scale collapse is becoming more likely as the government loses control over more territory. Myanmar is on the edge of disaster, and the entire country could soon descend into total anarchy. At number 7, North Korea. North Korea has always been isolated from the rest of the world, but in 2025 it's closer than ever to total collapse. The country is struggling with extreme poverty, food shortages, and crippling economic sanctions. According to UN reports, more than 40% of the population is malnourished, and food shortages have reached their worst levels since the 1990s famine. The economy is barely functional, with government spending focused almost entirely on the military and nuclear weapons program, while ordinary citizens struggle to survive. Political stability is also becoming more fragile. While Kim Jong-un maintains an iron grip on power, internal cracks within the regime are starting to show. Reports of increased defections, military purges, and elite dissatisfaction suggest that things could unravel fast. North Korea has managed to survive against the odds for decades, but with its economy in ruins and its people starving, even the most tightly controlled dictatorship has its breaking point. Next, number 6, Laos. Laos may not make global headlines often, but beneath the surface, it's facing a crippling economic crisis. Once seen as a rising tourism hub in Southeast Asia, the country is now drowning in debt, inflation, and financial mismanagement. The biggest issue? Debt to China. Laos owes over $14 billion to Beijing, much of it from loans tied to large infrastructure projects like the China-Laos high-speed railway. With limited revenue and a struggling economy, the country is finding it nearly impossible to keep up with payments. Inflation is spiraling out of control, with prices for food, fuel, and everyday goods surging by over 35% in just the past year. The collapse of tourism has only worsened the situation, and without strong industries to replace this lost revenue, the economy is running on fumes. If Laos doesn't secure financial relief soon, experts warn that a full-scale economic meltdown is inevitable. At number 5, Afghanistan. Afghanistan has been in crisis mode for decades, but under Taliban rule, the situation has gone from bad to worse. Since the Taliban took over in 2021, foreign aid, once the backbone of Afghanistan's economy, has all but disappeared. With over 90% of the population living below the poverty line, millions are struggling just to afford food and clean water. Sanctions and international isolation have further crippled the financial system, and inflation has made even the most basic goods unaffordable for ordinary Afghans. Security remains a massive concern, with armed resistance groups, including ISIS-K, continuing to launch attacks. Public executions and extreme laws have driven many Afghans to flee the country in search of safety. With no formal economy, no international trade, and widespread starvation, Afghanistan is closer to collapse than ever before. Next, number 4, Bangladesh. Bangladesh was once considered a rising economic power in South Asia, but in 2025, it's facing one of its worst financial crises in decades. Soaring inflation, a collapsing currency, and political unrest have made survival increasingly difficult for millions of citizens. Inflation is at an all-time high, with food prices jumping by over 40% in just 1 year. Essentials like rice, cooking oil, and fuel have become luxuries for many, and reports indicate that hunger is rising at an alarming rate. The country's debt crisis is also spiraling out of control. Bangladesh owes billions to international lenders and is struggling to pay back loans, especially as foreign reserves are running dangerously low. If the government fails to secure more aid, a financial collapse could happen within months. At number 3, Lebanon. Lebanon is already a failed state, and in 2025 the situation has only gotten worse. The country is in economic ruin, with hyperinflation, power shortages, and total government dysfunction making daily life unbearable. The Lebanese pound has lost over 95% of its value since 2019, making it nearly worthless. Banks have frozen citizen savings, forcing people to withdraw their own money at massive losses. Basic services have collapsed, with electricity available for only a few hours a day, hospitals running out of medicine, and the water supply becoming increasingly contaminated. Political corruption remains rampant, and the government is practically non-functional. Without drastic intervention, Lebanon will likely see total state collapse in the near future. Next, number 2, Syria. Syria has been in crisis for over a decade, but in 2025, things are reaching a breaking point once again. The country is still reeling from civil war, economic collapse, and foreign sanctions, leaving millions of Syrians in dire conditions. The Syrian pound has plummeted to record lows, with inflation making it nearly impossible for citizens to afford basic goods. Food insecurity is at an all-time high, with the UN warning that over 70% of Syrians now rely on humanitarian aid to survive. The war may have slowed, but violence has never fully stopped. Terrorist groups, rebel factions, and foreign military forces continue to fight for control, making much of the country unlivable. At this point, Syria is a completely failed state, and unless major diplomatic efforts are made, it could remain in collapse for generations. And finally, number 1, Yemen. Yemen tops the list as the most fragile country in Asia, with a full-scale humanitarian crisis and economic disaster unfolding. After nearly a decade of war, the country is now on the brink of total collapse. The biggest issue? Famine. The UN has reported that over 17 million Yemenis face extreme hunger, and without urgent aid, millions could die of starvation. The economy doesn't exist anymore. Yemen's currency is practically worthless, and the government has no money to pay public sector workers. War continues to devastate the nation, with ongoing conflict between the Saudi-backed government and Houthi rebels. With no functioning government, no stable economy, and one of the worst humanitarian crises in history, Yemen is not just on the verge of collapse, it's already there. These 10 countries are facing some of the most severe challenges in modern history. While the road ahead is uncertain, there is always hope for recovery and resilience. If you're in a country at risk of collapse, here are 5 practical tips to consider. 1. Stay informed on political and economic instability. 2. Have an exit strategy if things deteriorate quickly. 3. Diversify your finances to protect your wealth. 4. Stock up on essential supplies like food, water, and medicine. 5. Build local and international connections for support during uncertain times. What do you think? Will any of these nations turn things around, or is collapse inevitable? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore our channel for more insights into global events. Thank you for watching and stay informed.